Welcome back, everybody. It is Crabcakes and Baseball, December the 14th of 2023. One of the last pods we're going to have this year. I am Jerry Shank. With me, as always, our Maryland Scouting Director, Jamie Naill. Jamie, how are we doing today?
Doing well. Doing well. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm going to throw a short aside if you hear random background coos or random noises. It's not me just messing with y'all. I have a little kid who decided he wanted to be with daddy during the podcast. So you never say no to an 11-month old. So there's that for all of you. Professionalism at its highest, right here, right now. Um, Oh, okay. So let's get into some pod. We've got a really big one today. I'm very excited about this one, Jamie. We've been talking about it for a while. The introduction of our 2027 class rankings. We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the initial top 20, talk about a few players. But we're also going to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to our hearts and something I think is very pertinent right now as we're going into the beginning of a rankings with a class, and that is really what goes into rankings. And so we're going to start off really just talking about what all goes into the rankings process, what we do. Guys, it's not just a matter of, point and place. We take a lot of time, a lot of pride into this and what we do and how we do it. We know that it's not perfect. College coaches, pro scouts, they know it's not perfect. But what we're trying to do is bring in a different perspective because we get to see players on a little more broader scale than a lot of other people. We have that wonderful opportunity that we can do that. And so we're trying to put these players into a ranking system, into a list of, players that need to be known, players that need to be seen. And so we're going to go a little bit more in depth about what goes into those rankings. The first thing I do want that really there's really three things, and really you could break it down to two main things that go into rankings, and that's projection and then the current ability. Um, at the end of the day, you were really battling between those two things when we go into rankings. But let's talk a little bit more about projection first. Um, Projection obviously is kind of, as a coach, as a recruiter, as a scout, you're looking at the crystal ball, you're looking at a player, you're trying to read what type of player they are going to become, what you think they're going to be able to do, how much harder are they going to be able to throw, how much more athletic are they going to be able to be, how much stronger are they going to be. Because at the end of the day, at least on our side, and I've told this to Jamie, I've told this to a lot of players, a lot of coaches. One of the things that we really look at is when we're watching a player, we're trying to think of what is that player going to be like when he's a junior in college, or he's 21-year-old and he's been in pro ball for 2 years or just got drafted into it. So that's kind of that projection question that we look at. Now, when we go into a 27 player, who's just becoming a freshman, it's crazy to think like that. And it is tough. But one of the things that we really look at into that projection is it plays a bigger factor. It plays a bigger factor for us as a young buck as opposed to an older player. As they get older, that projection, we start to say, hey, when are they going to get there? They're not getting there where we thought they were going to be. That's going to affect what their ranking is. Jamie, I want to throw it your way because I'll just talk forever. What give me just kind of your thoughts about this subject.
Yeah, I mean, rankings, and you and I have these conversations all the time. Rankings are one of, if not the most difficult thing that we do with our job. You're looking at a bunch of different things about not only current ability, but how the player projects as a whole throughout his high school career and leading into college. So there's a ton of different things that we look at. There's a lot of different things of where we place them in these rankings and why they move so much and why I sit down and do them for 2 weeks straight and go over 70 to 100 plus hours looking at these rankings and move them around because there's so much different things that you have to look at. So projection, current ability, how they play in a game compared to how they look in a showcase, all of that stuff matters. So yeah, I mean it's a very difficult thing, but we embrace it and we love it. So rankings, that's kind of how that kind of plays out.
Right, and then just to even be more specific, I want you to go more about like what you're looking at when you're trying to project a player. Like when you're seeing a guy for the first time, what's going through your thoughts when you're trying to figure out his projection or that crystal ball I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, you're not just looking at the game ability, how they impact the game, um, but you're looking at the body and you're looking at all of this kind of stuff of how they project throughout their high school years. If a player is in the 27 class and he's 5'3", um, is that body going to project into a 6 foot frame and be 200 pounds by the time he graduates? And then you look at a 2027 that's 6'1", 185 pounds of pure muscle. How's that going to project? So the difference between projection of one player, player A to player B is different. And that's what we have to look at. We have to look at the projection in the body as well as the game as a whole.
Right, and going right with that, just to kind of wrap up the projection side of it, you're looking at it, you're trying to figure out what they're going to become, um, because at the end of the day, you want to see that. And that was something, especially as a college coach, you're really looking at it hard. And that's why you get to see guys going, coming back and forth, going out to watch a player because or they really want to get a good grasp on what they're currently able to do. And then how much better can they get once they get their hands on them, once they're able to work with them. And so that projection really plays a large factor in it. But honestly, the way baseball is going, segue, it's going into that current abilities playing a bigger factor because baseball training, the way players are working right now, they're getting bigger, faster, and stronger every day, and it's getting better and better and better. And so you're seeing this current ability start to play a bigger factor because they're starting to reach that ceiling faster. When I first started coaching, way back, when the dinosaurs were around, you saw players and you that projection that you wanted the projection you saw, you had to guess and you really didn't get those players to get to that ability until once they got to college. But now you're seeing it in high school, you're seeing a lot more training, you're seeing a lot more individualized uh, training facilities, so you're seeing those ceilings starting to be matched before they're reaching even the college level. So that's a great thing. So that goes into my next one, which is current ability. And I say current ability, it's what the swing that we're seeing right now. How hard are they throwing right now? How fast are they running right now? A lot of those statistics that we can get right, hard facts right in front of us. And that's what that current ability really shows to us. And then we look at it and we want to see how it transfers into a game. Does that BP swing? It looks really good, but what happens when they have to guess or identify what's coming out of a pitcher's hand? How much different is that going to be? So that's something where it really, really does play. It plays a big factor. These things, just projection and current ability, they're always going back and forth when it comes to the ranking side of it. So, that current ability, what we're looking for, how they transition in the game, how they play in the game, how easy do they make the game seem. So, Jamie, what else would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, well, I think you hit it right on the head there with the current ability. Metrically looking at data and looking at all these metrics that we do at our events and stuff like that. We want to see how that transfers to a game. Just like you said, a player can have a 99, 100 mile per hour exit velocity, but does that transfer to the game? Does that swing in BP transfer to an in-game swing? And that's the biggest thing. And that goes into projection and looking at the if the swing is projectable and how it plays in game. So like you said, current ability is huge, projection is huge, but we really want to see how that transfers to a game.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about with this, what we're doing with going into rankings, and it's something that it does play a factor. We've talked about it, but it's something that is not quite as big as you might think it is. It just really depends on the player, and that's the games, the statistics, like the game stats, their batting averages and what they're doing in game. It really varies based on the player, based on where they're playing and who they're playing against. Now you're down. Obviously, that's why the portal has become something that's really been and has gotten so much stronger is because you're seeing guys, you're being able to say, hey, they played at the college level already. So now that's going to transfer maybe to my school. That's why junior college players, you see it, you see how they play, you see the stats. The stats play a much bigger number at junior college level than necessarily at the high school level because of the higher level of baseball. Obviously, that's kind of an obvious answer, but it's just something to know. But yeah, those game stats that you watch in high school, it depends on who they're playing against. They might hit 600, but maybe they're not playing against the best competition. And so we don't use that as big as it is unless you're playing, maybe you're playing in a big time conference, you're playing against, you know what they're playing against. And we talked about this in previous pods too. Montgomery County was a case in point because of all the arms that we have been able to see move up. I think we talked about Trent Lopez last week or 2 weeks ago, and that was one case example where you know the pitching he's facing against. So that's going to give you a better idea because they're facing higher level arms. So that's something that we play into factor when it comes to these game stats. But it's really hit and miss. So when you get an email or you get told, hey, this guy hit 600 in this or did this and that, it's like, okay, well, that's great, congratulations, but who was it against and how was it done? And so that's something where you really enjoy being able to go and watch that player and see his current ability and see how it transfers in game. Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about this game, but when you're talking about baseball, is the production on the field. You can have the metrics, you can have whatever you want. It all comes down to production, and I think you have to look at it a little more deeply and look at who you're facing, the competition level, and all that kind of stuff. So, it depends on what you do in between the lines. That's why we play the game. And that's why we go out and watch these guys in game compared to a showcase or an event style workout. So production is a huge thing, but you have to look at it on a deeper scale of the competition level and the players that they're facing as well.
Yeah, for sure. And these aren't the only things that go into the rankings, but these are the two biggest factors, in my opinion. When we're ranking players, obviously there's other things, intangibles, the type of person, and then even more like I kind of call it like private investigator stuff. How old are they? What's the family like? What's the family look like? Because that gives you that projection range. Um, so there are a lot of other factors that go into this, and it's what we do when we're trying to do all of these rankings and figure out where we're setting these four players. So let's actually get into the 27 rankings. We spent a little bit longer than I thought we would, but every time you have a good conversation, it always goes a little bit longer. So let's get into this 2027 class. We're really excited because it's looking really impressive. We went back and forth at the total number of what we were going to do here, but we settled with a top 20. And to start off, at the number one spot, you've got the outfielder, right handed pitcher, Anderson Lambert out of McDonough. At the two spot, also out of McDonough, you've got the right handed pitcher, corner infielder, Jack Ortiz. At the three spot, catcher, Franklin Zerpa out of Walter Johnson in Montgomery County. At the four spot, you have Avik Cherry, middle infielder, right-handed pitcher out of Broadneck. At the five spot, Jack Simeon out of Cape Henlopen, right-handed pitcher, middle infielder. At the sixth spot, Archbishop Spalding, infielder Tyler Jones. Number 7, out of Good Counsel, your outfielder, right-handed pitcher Andrew Bezak, excuse me. At the eighth spot, out of Stephen Decatur, you've got two-way talent pitcher outfielder Dalen Linton. Number 9, also out of Good Counsel, the catching physical prospect Ryan Knoll. And then rounding out our top 10, you have the two-way talent pitcher, middle infielder out of the Avalon School, Malcolm Blackman. So, Jamie, we've gone through our top 10, taken a good look at it. Let's go through a few of the players. And obviously, the first player we got to talk about is the guy who we're going with the number one spot in our initial release, and that's Anderson Lambert.
Yeah, Anderson Lambert. We've had multiple conversations about Lambert. This is a clear cut number one in our eyes. The projection is through the roof. It's a very very high ceiling. The ability to impact the game on both sides is extremely important to us. We saw him at the Maryland Junior State Games this summer, and he impressed immensely. Just the size, the physicality already starting to progress in the body. It's an advanced skill set on both sides. He can pitch. He can hit. We really like the actions in the outfield as well. So Anderson Lambert, clear cut number one.
Yeah, and I think one of the most intriguing things really kind of goes back to that projection fact. Just watching the way, for me, watching the way his hands work at the plate, you see, it's just there's a lot of free, there's a lot of speed there, and that's something that's something hard to teach, in my opinion. For hitters, what the hand path and hand speed are two things that are hard to really teach, and he's starting to show that. Really like bright future ahead for him. Now, the next player we're going to talk about, we're going to drop down to our number three spot. Really interesting catching prospect, a man to say the least, and that's Franklin Zerpa.
Yeah, man child. That's what Franklin Zerpa is. Extremely physical. We saw him at a Cane Scout Day this summer, this fall, down in Virginia. Franklin Zerpa, he can do it on both sides. I love the defensive actions. I love how the hands work behind the plate as well. Advanced arm accuracy, arm strength behind the plate. And we really like the swing. Like you want to talk about poolside juice. There's not many that can compare to Franklin Zerpa. So I can't wait to go out and see him with my own eyes, especially in game. This spring is going to be huge for him. So Franklin Zerpa, definitely one to circle. Definitely one to see. This winter leading into next spring.
All right, moving on. The last player we want to talk about in this top 10, we're going to move down just a little bit and we're going to our number seven spot. And that's another one we've got to be able to see on a couple occasions. Really intriguing talent. The outfielder, right handed pitcher, Andrew Bezic.
Yeah. Andrew Bezak, we love him. We've seen him a bunch, over the years, especially this summer, Mid Atlantic State games. We saw him as well as junior future games. So another guy that can impact on both sides. We really like the swing, the ability to hit to both sides, to all fields, and backspin to the gap. So Bizak, we're interested to see where the physical maturity, how that sets in as he kind of progresses through high school. But you want to talk about a guy that can impact the game and one that definitely catches your eye when you see him, Andrew Bizak. He's at the top of that list.
All right, now let's move on to our back half. Normally, we don't do this. We basically will just give a kind of the teaser of a top 10. But what I like to do is, with our initial rankings, try to put out the full list for the first time so you can see it. So we're going to talk about everybody in this one. Let's go through 11 through 20 now. At the 11th spot, out of Archbishop Spalding, you've got middle infielder Anthony Badillo. At number 12, the two-way talent from Landon School, Matthew Rosner. 13, another middle infielder pitcher out of Broadneck, Cooper Mengel. At the 14 spot, out of Severna Park, two-way talent as well, Brett Hudson. Number 15, out of Georgetown Prep, Nick Roldan. At number 16, out of Calvert Hall, Anthony Williams. At 17, out of Cape Henlopen, Jamison Tingle. At 18, out of Calvert Hall, Drew Kittleberger. Number 19, homeschooled Mark Williams Jr. And then rounding out our initial top 20, you got the left-handed hitting first baseman out of DeMatha, Mikey Shiano. Now, I didn't give positions for a lot of them because a lot of times too, when you're young, you're naturally a two-way guy because you're a good athlete. And, your best athletes are going to be able to play, are going to do both at a young age going to it. We'll start to see a little bit more separation in that as we move on. A lot of those guys that I had mentioned in this 11 through 20, and honestly through the top 20, were two-way talents to begin with. So that's why I kind of went away from saying the positions, just to stop sounding redundant through it. But let's go back, talk about a few players here, Jamie. The first one, really intriguing middle infielder at Spalding. You know, we talked about them before about how they just continue to get talent and talent and talent. This one looks like another one, and that's Anthony Badillo.
Yeah, Anthony Badillo. Bright future for this young man. All the research that I've seen, we saw him down at the 13U National Championship at Lake Point over the summer. Love how the hands work at the plate. It's the line drive approach, the ability to hit to all fields. I really like the poolside line drive approach that I saw in the video. Can't wait to see him with my own eyes. This is a guy that you're going to see skyrocket through these rankings the more that we see him. The people that I've talked to, coaches wise, he can really pick it up the middle as well. So this is a bat and a defensive player to circle.
Yeah, now let's go on to the next one. Another two-way talent out of Calvert Hall. Really intriguing team, Calvert Hall, as well. We talk about Spalding, but a lot of really nice young talent that we've got to lay eyes on over at Calvert Hall. But let's talk about Anthony Williams.
Yeah, Anthony Williams. Saw him at the Calvert Hall Scout Day this fall. Love the defensive actions. You want to talk about advanced defensive actions, and Anthony Williams is on that list. I like the swing. There's some things to work on there. The body still needs to mature a little bit, but I love the defensive actions, and he's a defensive first guy. I like the arm on the mound too. He can spin for strikes. He pounds the zone, fills it up. So there's one definitely to circle in this back half of this top 20 that I'm really intrigued to watch, this winter heading into the spring.
All right, and then the last one we're going to talk about is the really talented homeschooler, two-way player Mark Williams Jr.
Yeah, another two-way in this top 20. We saw him at the preseason All-State last winter. Looking forward to seeing him this winter again. Switch hitter. I love the frame, 6'2", 185, so it's already pretty advanced when you talk about physicality and strength there. Super athletic. Really like the left-handed swing. He can spray to all fields, and the arm is there as well. So I think when you're talking about true two-way talent, I know it's tough in this class with them being so young, but this is one that you're going to see that two-way really project and really skyrocket through his high school career.
All right, now moving on, want to do something a little bit different too than what we normally do. Have a little healthy debate here, Jamie, with me. Obviously, the beauty I like about doing rankings is all of us have different opinions. We try to bring it all together when we do these rankings because there are some things that I take into account. I feel are more important than Jamie does. Same thing across anything when you're talking about it, and we try to use our experience and but we still want to have some strong, I guess not necessarily strong feelings, but we have kind of our foundation of what we're looking at in players. So let's have a little bit of a debate about some of the things that we spoke about earlier when it came to the rankings. And the first thing, kind of to bring all of this together, we're going to use two players out of our rankings that we want to talk about in specific, and kind of go a little bit more in depth as to as basically kind of like a case study as an example. And the first player that I want to talk about is Avik Cherry. Obviously, the talent is amazing. We love his ability and what he brings to the game. It's really, really at the top of the level. If you're talking about effect on a game, you could probably put Cherry maybe close to the top of this list. What holds him back, and I say holds him back right now, is when you're looking at projection, you're wondering, he's got a more compact frame. How much bigger is he going to get? And that's one of the bigger question marks. And so that's something that we're trying to figure out and we're trying to understand. All right, well, how much bigger is he going to get, and how does that affect that ceiling and that projection? That's something that we're looking at because obviously, as a player, Jamie, he's somebody who we really like.
Yeah, when you're talking about on-field ability, Avik Cherry, like you said, is close to the top of this list. And we talked about Avik a bunch throughout these rankings of where to put him, where does he fit. Right now, you're looking at a right now ability, and Avik Cherry is towards the top of that list. But then you look at projection and look at where the body's going to go and stuff like that. And that may have slid him a little bit down to four. Now, this is still talking about a top five player in a very, very deep and talented class, which is the 2027 class. So Avik Cherry, obviously we love him. We've seen him a bunch. The ability to impact on both sides. He can pitch a little bit as well, but that bat is very, very special. And he impacts the game. He's one that catches your eye every time you watch him play. But there's a lot of stuff that go into the body and go into projection and stuff like that. And that's where we have Avik right now. So it's a discussion to be had for the future over these winter months, over next spring into next summer. But Avik Cherry, definitely a very special player that we obviously are very intrigued by and love watching him play.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I want people to please understand, we're not trying to go in or like bash or do anything towards any player here. We're just trying to kind of give examples, kind of broad examples as to what goes into our rankings, trying to give you better access and a better feel for what we're looking at. The beauty of this of the size factor is it's changed, it's evolved in just literally like the past 5 years. This pro scouts used to really like they had to be a big time effect of the game in order to really move on to that next level. Um, Me personally, there was a few players in the past that I really liked, but I thought it would affect them later on because of their smaller stature. They necessarily didn't. They affected the game great, but that their size and projection, you weren't sure how they were going to end up. I've had a player who I ranked a little bit lower than honestly where I really liked him. Because of that, and he ended up being drafted. He was a second round draft pick, and he's still playing ball right now, balling out. So, obviously, as I've said before, and if you ever see my Twitter account, um, I'm very, very excited when somebody proves me wrong, and I love it when we're going through this. So that's just why we brought up Avik. It's a unique situation. Obviously, the current ability is something that is almost game changing. Like it's really something we really like, but that's the factor that we're still wondering, and it's something that's going to be fun to follow throughout because he can still ball out all it is, and we'll rank it. And as he gets older, those rankings, their current ability is going to catch up or it is going to play more of a factor than this projection crystal ball. Now, the next player I want to talk about is another unique situation, and that's Jamison Tingle out of Cape Henlopen. And then this is one of the players that is an immense athlete. He stars in three sports. He is a big time football player, he's a big time basketball player, and he's a big time baseball player. And this is something where, we've talked about, and I said personally, I like players who play multiple sports. I think the hardest thing to teach as a coach is competitiveness. And you need to get that on field, that big in game experience as much as possible to compete, compete, compete. Playing multiple sports does that. It has a big time effect every time you're out there. But in his case, he's playing three sports and he's so good at all three of them. And so it's really like, where's he going to end up? And what sport is he going to play? And so, Jamie, I want to throw it your way now because this was something where we're just trying to figure out, how do we rank this young man who's got a ton of talent, but it's across the board.
Right. Yeah. Jameson Tingle led Cape's football team to a state championship game this year. He's been able to dunk, I think, since his seventh grade in middle school. So, like, it's an immense talent, like you said, across all three sports. We obviously love him on the baseball field. We've seen a bunch from him, whether it be a scout day or an event, in game, stuff like that. He can impact the game immensely. Now, this is a guy that is a star football player, a star basketball player, and very good at baseball. Where does he end up? What is he going to do at the college level? And we don't know that yet. And does that take away from his baseball ability and his ability to work on his craft on the baseball field? If you're playing football, throughout the year, and you're playing basketball throughout the year, and you're playing baseball, during the spring and then a little bit in the summer, how does that impact the game, long term? So that's kind of what we're looking at with Jameson Tingle. You look at the body and you look at the ability on the baseball field, and if he was a sole baseball player, it may be a little different of a story. But where does that football career take him? Where does the basketball career take him? We don't know that, and that's kind of what we looked at when we were doing these rankings.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to have for this young man. I mean, definitely, obviously, the talent is there, um, and it is truly across the board as to what was that's the biggest question. What sport is he going to end up with? And honestly, it probably is a very good shot. It is multiple sports, but man, playing three sports at the college level, now you're talking into like a tenth of a 1% of players who can do that. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him. But those are two kind of case studies that we wanted to break down just a little bit more and try to tie together what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast into what goes into it. Because hopefully, after all of this, all of you who are listening, who see this, you're understanding, hey, there's a lot more. We're just not throwing names up against a wall and seeing what sticks. We're trying to get in depth and really go into it. And we're trying to give you a little bit of an access into what goes through our mind when we're talking about players. The last thing that we're going to talk about here, because we have gone pretty deep into this, is a teaser because, yes, we got the rankings out. They came out yesterday. You got to see this top 20 list. Today, you've got your podcast, you got to see it. Tomorrow, we're going to have another story on the site. It's going to be a teaser or a teaser for the next rankings update because we've got a list of a few players to follow that maybe just quite yet didn't make that top 20. Honestly, maybe two, we didn't quite know where we wanted to put them because we didn't get to lay eyes on them enough yet. So we've got the ability that we're going to expand this list, but we feel very confident with this 20. But we're going to have a teaser tomorrow, a story tomorrow about some other players that more than likely in the next update, you're going to see their names, 10 guys to follow. So I know, Jamie, you're very excited about that story.
Yeah, yeah, that story's going to be a big one. Just kind of for the fact of we didn't know whether we were going to go top 25, top 20. We kept going back and forth because this class is so deep and it's so talented. We settled with the top 20, but this next 10, top 10 to follow is going to be a very intriguing story for not only college coaches but coaches across the state to look at and to follow with some of the guys that didn't make that top 20 that are right outside, that we definitely see will hit the rankings at some point and most likely very shortly.
Yeah, and so the last thing I'll say is these rankings, we start at 20, we end by the time they're seniors, it's going to be closer to 200, maybe even more at that list because we're trying to expand as much as possible. Really, the reason why we expand like we do is we don't want a large gap between players. For example, like 20 and 21, you don't want to see a big gap in between those players. So that's why we gradually expand as we're finding more and more players. We've got a good database. We've been able to see a lot of players. Obviously, we haven't seen all of them. There's going to be a lot more who are going to jump out and who are going to jump into this list. And you see that all the way through their senior year. So this is always fun starting out with this initial list because you really get to see how people progress, how they continue to get better, and then you also get to see the other end of some guys who just maybe they get burnt out or they move on into a different direction, they play a different sport, they decide to do something else. So you really get it's fun because we are invested in this and we really do take pride in following the players and trying to make these rankings as great as possible and being able to follow them over the course of the next 4 years. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Jamie, thank you as always for joining me. This was a lot of fun. You got any last final words of wisdoms? Plural wisdoms.
You
Wisdom.
always throw this on me, Jerry. At the end, I'm a man of very few words, but no, this was fun. This class is going to be a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to see how they progress. It's a very deep class, a very talented class. Yeah, and as the months roll on and we see more of them, you're going to see these rankings expand and get deeper. And this is definitely a class that compares to a lot of our really, really deep classes across the state. This one is going to be very deep and very talented as well. So, looking forward to the future of all these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Jamie Naill, I am Jerry Shank. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your continued support. Make sure you're going onto the website. You're following our stories. We got a lot of events coming up this winter. We're also running through right now this month our event leaderboards, top performers, top performances from statistical and analytical basis. From this past year. So make sure you're following that and you're seeing it. Next month, we're going to throw up our top most viewed profiles, the top players from this past year. So make sure you're visiting the site. Thanks again, everybody. It's crab cakes and baseball because that's what PBR Maryland does. We'll talk to you next time.